From the author of Spinsterella, the strange and unusual romance and spellbound, a darker shade of black comes the legendary Magic Children. Pick up the conclusions of the Spinsterella trilogy in paperback and e-readers this Halloween. It's deeply troubling to see how many black people are spellbound by Marvel Studios' upcoming Black Panther movie. And the way they're behaving, they're acting like it's the second coming of The Cosby Show. But when I take a look at their behavior, it doesn't remind me of the hype that came around The Cosby Show in 1984. No, it reminds me actually of the Peanuts special, It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. Now, when I look at many of these Negroes out here talking about this Black Panther movie and going out of their way to defend this Black Panther movie from any sort of criticism, they remind me of Linus on It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. Now, Linus had this delusion in his mind that the Great Pumpkin would come out of this pumpkin patch on Halloween with all these presents and toys. And because he had such a strong delusion, he decided he was going to go in this pumpkin patch to wait for the Great Pumpkin. And he brought Sally, Charlie Brown's sister, along to go with him to this pumpkin patch to wait for this Great Pumpkin. And she literally got angry at Linus when she realized she wasted an entire night where she could have gotten all this candy sitting there in this pumpkin patch. And then at the end of the episode, Lucy comes, takes Linus home, wraps him in a blanket, because all he gets for his trouble is a big bag of nothing. And that's what's coming to this Afro-American Negro who is sitting there thinking that this Black Panther movie is going to lead to some sort of big revolution as it relates to the African American image and the presentation of the African American image in media. Anyone who has studied the history of film and regarding the African American image will tell you what this Negro is going to get regarding this Black Panther movie, but the spellbound, still caught up in their delusion like Linus, believe that there's going to be big change. Now, I can look at the history of film and tell you, again, that the Negro is going to get a big bag of nothing. All you have to do is go back 20 years to Wesley Snipes, who literally revived the entire superhero movie genre after Warner Brothers destroyed it with 1997's Batman and Robin. Now, Batman and Robin was such a terrible movie that the studios were getting ready to say we weren't going to make any more superhero movies after this. However, when Blade came out later in the year and showed everyone that there was still an audience for superhero movies, a lot of people thought it would lead to a big revival of black superhero movies. However, what happened was, after Blade was a big hit and Wesley Snipes took an obscure X-list character and made him into a major icon, all the black community got was a big bag of nothing as Hollywood went on to make the X-Men with Bryan Singer and Spider-Man with Sam Raimi, and then went on to make the Marvel Cinematic Universe. 20 years passed until we got this Black Panther movie, and again, a lot of black people do not have the critical thinking skills to see what you're going to get at the end of the day. I mean, Wesley Snipes, with his own money and was executive producer of this film, went out and made a film that revived the entire superhero movie genre. But he got nothing at the end of the day, and black people did not get any more films after that. But black folks, sadly, still believe that there's going to be this big revival of black superhero films. And that's completely illogical, again, when you look at the history and the pattern of white liberal Hollywood. And now I can go fast forward to 2001, where Denzel Washington and Halle Berry won Oscars for their performances as Best Actor and Best Actress in Monsters Ball and Training Day. And after Halle Berry made her speech in 2001 of winning the Best Actress Oscar, she said that winning this Oscar was going to open doors. We fast forward to 2017, and Halle Berry now is saying that that Oscar has absolutely no value. And when we look at Halle Berry's career, she went from being a $15 million picture actress in 2004's Catwoman to starring in a film that faded into obscurity, Kidnap. So how many doors were open for Halle Berry? And how many doors were open for black actresses, even with an Oscar? And we have Monique, who also reinforces the same position who recently won an Oscar for Precious, also saying that the opportunities for black actresses are limited. So I'm sitting there listening to Halle Berry and Monique, and then looking at what happened to Wesley Snipes, and I'm saying to myself, I can clearly see the pattern that's going to happen. But many of these Negroes who are spellbound, they're sitting there believing that this Black Panther movie is going to open a lot of doors and pave the way to some sort of golden age where we're going to see all these black fantasy and black science fiction and black superhero movies. But that's just not going to happen, and it probably never will happen because when it comes down to Hollywood, Hollywood has never valued the black image and still doesn't value the black image. All anyone has to do is look at this Marvel Cinematic Universe and see where Black Panther stands in the pecking order to see how little value the Black Panther actually has to Marvel Studios. Because how many films had to come out before Black Panther was even considered for a film? That's right, at least about 8 or 9 movies had to come out before we even had Black Panther even considered for a movie. However, your Wesley Snipes was planning on making this movie early in his career, right after he made Blade, but nobody wants to talk about that, about how this black man was trying to make this film. But when it comes down to Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios, your Black Panther wasn't a priority. But your Negroes will sit there and tell you, oh, this is an event, this is going to be a major accomplishment, and all that does is show how dysfunctional they truly are. Why does it take a movie about a black superhero made by 2 white guys, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, being an event for you to see it as something important? Why does it take a black superhero movie made by white people for you to see value in the black image? That frame of thinking right there is completely backwards when you think about it. I mean, you're sitting there waiting for Hollywood to acknowledge you instead of seeing value in yourself in the same way that Wesley Snipes saw value in the obscure character of Blade. Now, Wesley Snipes saw value in Blade, and he saw value in the black image regarding Blade, and he made it into an icon based on his own image and his own ideas. And sadly, many black people don't have that sort of vision or imagination or creativity because they're waiting for some white person to give them the approval to use their own imagination. If that's not a slave, I don't know what is. You have to sit there and wait for white people to tell you that it's okay to have an imagination, and then you can imagine something. Then you can imagine yourself as a superhero. Then you can imagine yourself as a fantasy character. And that frame of thinking is completely backwards and dysfunctional. And many of these people who are out here defending this Black Panther movie, they have a slave mindset. They have to sit there and they believe that they have to wait until 2018 to go out here to support a black fantasy or science fiction story or a black fantasy or science fiction. Again, completely dysfunctional when you think about all these black guys who are out here creating comic books, all these black people out here creating science fiction, all these black people who've been creating fantasy, and they've been creating fantasy and science fiction for years. But you have to wait until it's 2018 and the Black Panther movie hits the theaters in order to support that. That's a completely shallow frame of reasoning, and it's a completely illogical frame of reasoning, and it shows, again, how much of a slave many of these Negroes are, that they have to wait for the white man's version of black to come out before they can start supporting black media that's made in their own image by their own people, showing us that they are putting black second and white approval first. And that's the other big problem as related to this whole Black Panther movie, is the covert contract many of these Negroes have, thinking that if they go out here and support this Black Panther movie, that there's going to be people who are going to support them and approve of them. They're believing that if the white media comes out here and makes a Black Panther movie, they're going to actually do that because they like black people. No, racists will make films featuring black people to get black dollars into their pockets. They could care less about you as a black person. They'll put this image of a black person out here and they'll make money off of that image and then have you believing that they're going to make more when all they're going to do is make as much money as they did with Blade in 1997, and then go back to making the same movies featuring the same white characters, and you're sitting there hoping, wishing, and praying that you'll get another movie sooner rather than later, when all you're going to get is the same amount of nothing. But you can't tell many of these Negroes this in their minds, that having them make this Black Panther movie means that white folks love us. No, again, it does not mean anything except that they love black dollars, and they love making black dollars at the expense of this Afro American Negro. And what's really sad is that they think that this Black Panther movie, some of them again with the covert contract, will think that it will lead to some sort of mainstream rise in popularity for black comic books, black science fiction, and black fantasy. And again, we should not be looking for approval from white people for our own fantasy, our own science fiction, and our own comic books. Stuff made by our own creators, we need to have been supporting that from day one. And I had one of these guys come to me in the comment section of one of my Black Panther movie videos, and he tried to take a jab at me saying, "Oh, I don't like black comic fantasy writers or black writers." And again, that's completely backwards, because I am a black fantasy writer. I've been writing the ISIS series for 5 years, and I wrote the original ISIS back in 1999, and I published it in 2002. And since then, I've written other black fantasy books like The Temptation of John Haynes, and books like the East Eve series. So I have been a black fantasy writer for over a decade and a half. So how can I hate black fantasy writers? What I hate is the fantasy that many black people have, like Linus, believing that this Black Panther movie is going to lead to some sort of renaissance as related to black fantasy and science fiction, or thinking that they're going to get some sort of white approval from this movie coming out. No, these are things we should have been doing for years. These are things that I have been doing behind the scenes, again, for the last 2 or 3 years. I've been talking about black fantasy and black science fiction ever since I started this channel, and people are sitting there acting like the Black Panther movie is going to lead to some sort of big thing, and it's not going to lead to anything. If Blade didn't lead to anything in 1997, no one should expect Black Panther to lead to anything in 2017. And it shouldn't take white people making a movie about a character they created regarding your image for you to go out here and support these black comic book artists who are making great black comics, these black science fiction writers who are making great black science fiction, and these black fantasy writers like myself who are out here making black fantasy. We should have been supporting our own media for the longest, and we should have been supporting those people before they even announced this Black Panther movie, or this Black Panther movie was a gleam in Kevin Feige's eye. We should have been putting our money towards supporting our own media, because it's our own media that shows our imagination and shows how creative we actually are. We shouldn't be waiting for white folks to tell us how to imagine ourselves. We should have been imagining ourselves that way and working towards imagining ourselves the way we see ourselves in fantasy and science fiction, because the way we see ourselves should have a higher value than that of any image created by any white person that's made to look like us. The way I look at it these days, I would rather spend my money supporting someone like Chris Miller, who's been making some great books like his coloring books, or supporting a guy like Mike Williams, who makes a great comic strip like Deke Sledge. I would rather support some black comics and some black media out here, black fantasy and science fiction, before I spend money on a Black Panther movie. Yes, it's nice that they made a Black Panther movie, but I would rather put money on those black creators, because those black creators are taking our image and telling our stories from our perspective, and our perspective should have the highest value in our own eyes. Because if we put white ideas above our own, that shows how spellbound we are, and how, in many ways, we're just like Linus, waiting for that great pumpkin to rise out of that pumpkin patch and give you attention and approval, and you're not going to get that from a Black Panther movie. The way you're going to help improve the black image is to go out here and create those opportunities for yourself, and do things like go out here and create your own fantasy and science fiction, or go out here and support great black owned fantasy and science fiction like I produce and many other people produce, out here on out here in the media that is not getting any promotion or getting any support in the mainstream media. All these brothers and sisters need our support, and we should be trying to make efforts to spend money with them instead of sitting here hoping, wishing, and praying for attention and approval from the mainstream media, all because they made a Black Panther movie. If you'd like to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. And if you want to try some of my SJS Direct Fantasy, like the ISIS series, the East-Team series, and the Temptation of John Haynes, you may do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.